football history buffs, you're going to love this one, so dig in. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, on the all-time winning programs in college football, what it looks like right now, how we arrived at this place, and what it may look like in the year 2030. If you love college football as much as I do, please lock it in here. Best discussion, debate, and analysis of college football on a daily basis involving myself and top bloggers, broadcasters, and writers in the industry. All right. The reason this hit me in the last couple of weeks is just a few weeks ago, Nebraska reached the landmark of 900 wins in its program's history. And this past Saturday, Oklahoma and Notre Dame matched them at the 900 win club. Currently, we have 7 programs that have reached 900 wins. Let's run down the list as it stands right this second as we enter week 5 of the 2019 season. Michigan's still holding on to that lead with 956 all-time wins, 40 more than Ohio State at 916. Texas at 911. Then we have Alabama, wow, right on the heels of the Longhorns at 910. Nebraska, Oklahoma, and Notre Dame at 900. Of course, the Cornhuskers losing to the Buckeyes could not extend their win total to 901. Penn State's at 895. Then we've got USC and Tennessee at 839. That's a tie right there, of course. Georgia coming on at 823 in 11th place. LSU at 804. Auburn, West Virginia, and wow, Clemson has reached the top 15 all-time in wins at 749. Keep in mind that I've included just the FBS schools, just the teams that are competing at the highest level. I've excluded Yale and Harvard and a few others that no longer play at that premium level. Let's now look at how the last 10 years of college football have affected these standings currently. So if we go back to 2010, so if we include the 2010 season all the way up until this past weekend's games, the top winning program in college football since then is, you guessed it, Alabama with 117 wins. Ohio State, number 2. We could have guessed that as well. We've got at number 3, Clemson, just one behind the Buckeyes at number 3. Oklahoma, the other program that has topped 100 wins since 2010. You see the rest of the list right there. Texas has fallen off significantly, so consider that Ohio State has bested Texas by just 5 wins all time, but they have 43 more wins since 2010, so Ohio State's come out of nowhere. They've blasted right by Texas. They have gone by Nebraska, Notre Dame, and Penn State in the last 9+ seasons. Alabama, with its 117 wins, has flown right by Nebraska, Oklahoma, Notre Dame, and Penn State in the all-time wins category as well. So this wins total looked a lot different 9 to 10 years ago, with Michigan still on top, but Ohio State down the list, Alabama down the list, Texas was number 2. And as I mentioned, Ohio State, Alabama have made the most progress in both passing 4 schools, and Alabama's right on the heels of Texas this season. And the way things look right now, you would think that even though Texas is much better than they've been, Alabama should eclipse Texas and take over the number 3 spot and have their sights on Ohio State possibly. The other big mover in the past 9+ seasons has, of course, been Oklahoma. They are one of only 4 teams, as I mentioned, with 100 wins since 2010. So now that they've reached 900, if you look back upon the past 9+ seasons, they have 101 wins. So that's 17 more than Notre Dame. So that has caught Notre Dame. They have 21 more than Penn State. So they've passed Penn State. And so Oklahoma's gained a few spots since then and caught Nebraska. They were 28 wins behind Nebraska in 2010. They've caught Nebraska now, who is only tied for 12th in wins since 2010. And again, that's only 12th in wins among the 15. So there could be other schools beyond these 15, and we'll talk about some of those schools in just a second, that have bested the likes of Nebraska and Tennessee, who are down the list in wins. It's not been a great 9+ seasons for West Virginia for the most part as well at 750. That's only 73 wins in the past 9+ seasons. So Clemson is only 1 behind West Virginia right now, as they have gained 108 wins. And, of course, Clemson has been the one school completely off the radar in terms of a top 15 9 to 10 years ago that have jumped into the top 15. Georgia, LSU, and Auburn have certainly held their ground, and Georgia in particular has gained a ton of ground with the 92 wins, and they are 19 ahead of LSU, and you would expect those two teams to continue to at least hold their ground, if not gain some ground in the top 15 in future seasons. USC, with its 25 more wins than Tennessee, has caught Tennessee. So 9+ seasons ago, Tennessee had 25 more wins than USC. And even though it's not been a stellar decade for the Trojans since Pete Carroll left, with their 81 wins to 56 for Tennessee, they've caught Tennessee at 839. And really, Tennessee, despite having a poor decade, despite the USC tie, they've really not lost any other ground. But now comes a point in which they're going to lose ground if they don't start winning some games, with Georgia right on their heels. But if you look at it, even with only 56 wins in the last 9+ seasons, Tennessee was kind of in a dead area where they were by themselves, just below the Elite Nine, 8 or 9 schools, and then they were far above the other ones. So they were kind of in this gap in amongst themselves, but now they're starting to feel the heat from the other schools. Let's look at winning percentage, because all these programs started at different times. There's a celebration of college football for 150 years this season, but not everybody's been playing for 150 years, and certainly the likes of Florida, Florida State, Miami in particular, not being on this list would emphasize this list that is spread over 150 seasons total, and those schools have been dominant or have been competitive for the past 40 to 50 in particular. Best winning percentage all time still belongs to Michigan at 730, but understand the trend here is that under Jim Harbaugh, it is stabilized around 73% winning percentage, but before that, it had dropped considerably under the likes of Rich Rodriguez and to a certain extent Brady Hoke in winning about 55% of their games. Ohio State at number 2 at 728. Urban Meyer won almost 91% of his games. Ryan Day off to a great start. Jim Tressel won 85+% of his games. So the Ohio State percentage is really coming up on the heels of Michigan, which is an interesting aspect of the rivalry when we look at the all-time series and when we look at the all-time standings among great college football powers, is that Michigan still holds the all-time series lead within the series of Ohio State. 40 more wins than Ohio State, the better winning percentage, but Ohio State is closing the gap considerably with 30 more wins since Urban Meyer took over than Michigan, 109 to 79. And then in addition to that, Ohio State has 49 more wins than Michigan going back to 2005 because Jim Tressel had done such a better job than Rich Rodriguez in particular, and also Brady Hoke. In terms of winning percentage, Alabama's right there behind Ohio State. Also Notre Dame at 727, 727. Alabama, of course, under Nick Saban, that winning percentage has gone considerably up. It's been pretty stable under Brian Kelly, who's had a nice run at Notre Dame. We've got the likes of Oklahoma at number 5 at 725. And those are really the teams that have separated themselves. If you go to Oklahoma, they're at 725 in 5th place. Then there's a drop to Texas at 705. And, of course, Texas's winning percentage since Mac Brown left has been pretty dismal, around 50% winning percentage there. Coming back up, of course, under Tom Herman. Then we've got some schools pushing that 70% plateau. After Texas at number 6, we have USC just a point below that, so they're on the heels of Texas. We've got Penn State in the mix at 699, and you see a number of schools right there. Of course, the major players in the past 10 years, Georgia under Mark Richt, even if we go back to the Mark Richt 15 seasons, he did much better than 65% winning percentage. He was in the high 70s. And then, of course, Kirby Smart and the 3 consecutive really good seasons that they've had at Georgia have raised that winning percentage. They're tied right now with LSU at 654. Auburn's been in a good place for the most part, despite some rocky seasons under Gene Chizik, in particular, obviously in 2012 when they went 3-9. But otherwise, Auburn's been a power and been stable at 63%. Of course, Clemson's on a huge, enormous surge. That 616 winning percentage has taken a huge lift in the past 8 to 9 seasons, especially since 2015 under Dabo Swinney. in going like 57-5 just here in the past few years. Keep in mind that West Virginia at 598, even though they're in 15th place all-time in wins, therefore I've got them rated number 15 in terms of winning percentage. That's just among those top 15 schools in wins. There are 4 schools that have better winning percentages all-time than West Virginia. They include Texas A&M, Washington, and Virginia Tech, but also Florida, who is the best winning percentage out of those teams and actually matches Auburn at 631. Tennessee, to be noted again, at 10th place all-time in winning percentage at 674, dropping by the game there at Tennessee, unless something changes here in due time under Jeremy Pruitt or others. So keep in mind the coaching aspect as we project forward has a lot to do with what may happen, of course, going toward 2030, and we'll make some projections here. So again, it's Michigan number 1, Ohio State number 2, Texas 3, Bama 4, Nebraska 5, followed by Oklahoma and Notre Dame. All those teams tied for the 900 club. Nebraska, Oklahoma, and Notre Dame with 900 wins are tied for 5th. So if we do some rough projections and look toward 2030, which is 11 seasons plus away, these are rough estimates because consider that since 2007, we've only had one coach out of these 15 schools stay at the same school, and that's, of course, Nick Saban at Alabama. So we've had complete coaching consistency and stability at one school, Alabama, and then you would also have to include Clemson. Dabo Swinney's been there since 2009. So for the past 10 years, Clemson with that stability, and obviously that's been the main reason for their surge. Ohio State, relatively stable. Urban Meyer, Jim Tressel stayed there for considerable amounts of time. Ryan Day just off to a good start at this point. You would have to consider Georgia to be a stable environment for coaches. Mark Richt was there for a long time. Kirby Smart off to a great start. Brian Kelly's been at Notre Dame since 2010. They've been in good shape. James Franklin starting to build some tenure at Penn State since 2014. The places, and let's add Oklahoma, certainly with Bob Stoops being there forever since 2000 and Lincoln Riley taking over 2 years ago. So they're in good shape. But the places that have been a bit unstable, and this has matched and correlated to the drop in winning percentage, of course, Nebraska working on a third head coach, Bo Pelini. Then, of course, Mike Riley, and now Scott Frost not off to a great start there. And we also have the situation at USC where they've had 5 head coaches, including Pete Carroll going back to 2009. Clay Helton's on the hot seat. Tennessee, a 5th head coach in Jeremy Pruitt there. Not the best of situations in regards to coaching stability, and they've been the worst of the 15 programs that we're analyzing right here, right now. So, as we project ahead to 2030, here's a rough projection based on how many wins we've got right now, and then what could happen based on the trajectory of these programs as they stand right now. Let's say Michigan averages 9 wins per season through the 2030 campaign. They will have 1,061 wins at the end of 2030. Ohio State, I'm going to average them out to 11 wins per season, gets close to Michigan at 1,044 wins, 17 behind. So Ohio State, 7 years ago, was 70 wins behind Michigan. They're now 40 wins behind Michigan, and this projection would put them 17 behind in 2030. Takes a long time to catch up. College football history has been going on a long time, 150 years. I'll give Alabama a little bit of a nudge above the 11-win mark. Again, Nick Saban could coach another 5 or 6 years, possibly. Let's give Alabama 11.5 wins per season. They would catch Ohio State in the second place at 1,044. Texas, tough to project. Mac Brown had a great run. It's a great program. Talent all over the place. Great facilities. Money. But Charlie Strong failed. Tom Herman's off to a decent start. I'll give them 9 wins per season. They get to 1,016 by 2030. Nebraska's a wild card. Scott Frost seems to be the right guy for the job. It's going to take a lot for him to turn the program around, as witnessed by recent efforts against Colorado and Ohio State. Let's give them 8 wins per year. And obviously, most of these coaches will not be around 11 years from now. So it's a rough estimate here. Nebraska almost gets to 1,000 wins. Oklahoma will surpass them at 10.5 wins. So I consider Oklahoma not to be quite on the level of Ohio State overall, depending on what they do with the coaching situation. I have a little bit more trust in Ohio State, regardless of who the head coach is. But Oklahoma right there is an elite team. Wins 10.5 per year. They get to 1,022. Notre Dame maybe a step behind. Haven't always reached the win totals of an Oklahoma, Georgia, Ohio State level by any stretch, but they're a solid 9.5 per year. That gets them over the 1,000 mark. Penn State under James Franklin has been good, but not great. 9 wins per year gets them to 1,000 as well. All right, the movers are Georgia in particular. Got to throw them in the 10.5 range per wins per season. Kirby Smart could be there for a long time. And also, of course, Clemson, Dabo Swinney, a young guy, vibrant guy in the prime of his coaching career right now, has that thing on a roll. We'll give him 11 wins per season, and that would get him past West Virginia and the Clemson program past West Virginia on the heels of Auburn, despite Auburn in decent shape, winning about 9 games per season. These are just rough estimates, and based on these win projections, on average, this would be the all-time wins total for these programs. This would be the top 15 in 2030. But of course, we've got teams below the top 15 that could be pressing the lower end of this scale. So look out, Tennessee, if you don't get it fixed here soon. Texas A&M's just below Clemson at 744 right now. If they win 9 per year, they get to 849 and projected would pass West Virginia. Washington right now has only 6 less wins than Texas A&M at 738. Give them 9 wins per season. They get to 843. Florida is intriguing. Also Wisconsin, although the Badgers are a bit out of range at this point. They're 25th in the nation in wins right now among FBS schools at 709. Give them 10 per year going through 2030. They get to 826. Florida is a bit of a threat to the likes of West Virginia and possibly Auburn and Tennessee, of course. Florida's at 730 currently. If they win an average of 10 per season, they're right now 20th all-time wins. They get to 847. That's what your top 15 could look like in about 11 seasons. Keep in mind that I skipped over Virginia Tech, Georgia Tech, Pitt, Arkansas, and Navy. All of those schools are in amongst 16 through 25. Don't see good things for them right now, but of course things change, and they change drastically. It was only about 5 to 6 seasons ago, maybe let's go back to 2012 or 13, that Bobby Petrino was winning 11 and 12 games at Arkansas. And we've certainly seen Virginia Tech prosper under Frank Beamer and through the first 1 or 2 seasons under Justin Fuente. These other schools, it's going to be difficult for them to amp up the win pace to get into that top 15. All right, time to get your take on the all-time winning programs in college football, how it currently stands, what you've seen in the past that has led us to this point, what you see in the future headed toward 2030 and maybe beyond, although that's almost impossible to project. I thought about going to 2040, then I thought, you know what, we have no idea what's going to be going on in the next 10 to 15 years. At least the coaches in place, especially at some of the more stable programs, who can project that they may be around for the next 5 to 10 years, and that's why I took it to 2030. Let's get your opinion on this. Would love to get your take. Also, maybe some suggestions on what else I could look at in analyzing these kind of subjects in college football. I love the history of college football. Love it, love it, love it. That's why I got so many scores in my brain and a lot of useless information that I spew at you each and every day here at the Voice of College Football. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Help us build the channel right here at Mark Rogers TV, the Voice of College Football.